Welcome to the College Football Preview Show presented by Yolked. I'm your host, John Saranitas. As always, I'm joined by my partner, Ryan Barry. Ryan, how are you this evening?
I'm doing pretty well. Feeling good. Excited to be here. As always, I think I say the same thing every week, but how can I not be feeling good after last weekend, right? There was a lot of great college football in New England,
Yeah,
so I'm feeling good.
there was, and your Minutemen got a win. They got a dub. So that's always a good thing. It's a rare occasion. So when you can get it,
Yeah,
you live La Vida Loca. You take advantage of it. I'm kidding you, Mass fans.
yeah.
Don't attack me in the comments now.
It's more
Feel
like
free
a
to, but
yeah. It's more like a hooray they won type celebration. So
I do want to remind you that we are brought to you by Yoked. Visit yoked.com today for special offers for Yoked, one of the best protein powders in the game. It's safe, effective, and you see results. Whether you're a young athlete looking to get bigger and stronger, or you're an established athlete looking to add muscle and tone up your physique, Yoked is the protein product you need. Visit yoked.com today for more information. I can tell you this, I've used the product in the past. I know people who have, people swear by it. It's a terrific product. We wouldn't endorse it if we didn't think it was. So if you're looking for something that you can add to your diet to enhance your workout, Yoked is that product. Visit yoked.com for more information today. All right, of course, the big story this past weekend, Ryan, was the Boston College Eagles picking up a 23-19 win over Michigan State. Uh, you know, this is a signature win in the early tenure of Bill O'Brien. We could call it that. I'm not sure we needed to storm the field afterwards for it. I thought that was a bit much, but this was a really nice win for this football program. Of course, they improved to 3-1. And we said this last week. I think if you had told BC folks that after 4 weeks going into the season, you'd be 3-1, I think they would take it. The rest of their schedule shapes up pretty nicely. They do have some tough games in there. Syracuse, Pitt. They got to go to SMU. You still got to go down to Blacksburg and take on Virginia Tech. But if they stay healthy, Castellanos plays within the system. They play mistake-free football, fundamentally sound football. This is shaping up very similar to that 1993 season. You're not going to have that signature win like that team did when they went to South Bend and knocked off number 1 Notre Dame. But it reminds me a lot of that season. It's shaping up to be one of those 8 to 9 win seasons with a bowl win that could really propel this program moving forward.
Yeah, it's the type of win that you're like, okay, we can. If you're a fan of BC and there's any type of criticism, it's just like, remember how we've been going 5-7, 6-6, right? 4-8,
7-5, right?
Yeah, these like this.
Haven't won 8 games or more since 2009.
Right. It's very important to celebrate these. Like, this is awesome, right? I mean, I think seeing Treshaun Ward get going, I think is really, really important because I feel like it's been they haven't really found their groove running the ball yet. So getting him going, I thought was great. I mean, regardless,
he's taken over as their lead back.
Right. And, 100+ yards.
Kind of like Kai Robichaux did last year. He wasn't really the guy going into the season. It was Garwo, and then he took over.
Right. And that's what, again, these are the things all you can ask for if you're a BC fan, right? It's get these wins. It shows that you're legitimate. It's not the type of win that should get you ranked again. It's the type of win that you feel good about where, like, if this win happened in December in the Pinstripe Bowl, you're kind of like, okay, whatever. But you got this win at home, Red Bandana Night. That's huge, right? Yeah. And to do it in the fashion that they did, regardless of the 3 interceptions, right? You still have to win these games, right? There's a lot of reasons people could poke holes, but it's a win that they need, and they're going to continue building momentum. And the way the ACC looks, it's pretty open, So it's not crazy to think that if you just keep working on your game and shoring things up, you should absolutely be in the mix at this point. It's at the point where if you're a fan, you should expect them to be in the mix, not the favorite, but in the mix for the ACC championship, like a spot in it.
Yeah, no, I agree wholeheartedly. I think that they're certainly in the mix. And, you mentioned the Red Bandana game. Obviously, it's a special night honoring the legacy of Wells Crowther. I thought, per usual, this was the 11th Red Bandana game, I should say. I thought Boston College did a tremendous job honoring Wells, his family, the sacrifice he made that day on 9/11. You can't say enough about the job that the program has done. They were giving away these red bandanas, which was also pretty cool.
That's awesome.
Yeah, and I think it speaks to this has become such a great tradition in the New England college football landscape. And I love that they play the game against a quality opponent every year. It adds to the value of the game. The game was on ACC Network, which I think brings more attention to Wells and his legacy and the family. Just a great job by Boston College. I mean, it's always a first-class event every year for the Red Bandana game, and this one didn't disappoint. Fantastic job. And by the way, the jackets that the team, the coaches, and staff members wore in honor of Wells, these red jackets, they were fantastic. I mean, if you go on our X account, Donovan Ezaraku had his on. They were fantastic. I mean, just a well done job all around. Eagles, of course, return to action this Saturday for a noon kickoff against Western Kentucky. We'll talk about that in a little bit. UConn picking up a big 48-17 win, program record, 421 yards rushing, a dominant performance. Darrell Robinson leads the way, scores a couple of rushing touchdowns. Nick Evers threw a couple of touchdown passes, rushed for a touchdown, just a dominant performance. And for UConn, they have taken it, they at least initially are taking advantage of this 6-game homestand, which is ridiculous to call, to say the term homestand when it comes to college football. They still have 5 straight games at home. They host Buffalo this week, but what an impressive win for this program. Is this the kind of win, Ryan, that springboards this program now to a place where they end up winning, let's say, 7 games plus and end up making a bowl?
I think it has to. I think that when you consider how deflating that week 1 loss was to Maryland, I think that they're at a point where you're like, oh, like these are the games we're supposed to win. To be honest, these are a lot of the types of games they have on their schedule this year. So if you're a UConn fan, you think about last season, and maybe this was a game that was a lot closer than it should have been, right? But it's like, oh, we're taking care of business as we should against this opponent. It should kind of start to reinstill those feelings of confidence in Jim Mora, that if you were maybe a little bit worried, now you're thinking to yourself, okay, we're winning this game against Florida Atlantic, who's definitely not a great team, but it's a sign of progress when you take care of business like this against a program like FAU, right? And to the fact they barely even threw the ball too, right? You know, I know Nick Evers wasn't a breakout game. I know he ran a lot for sure, but he didn't have to throw because the run game was so all right. It's like you're starting to find an identity, and that's what a win like this does. And especially with Buffalo this week, you keep building on that, and it's to the point where you're like, yeah, like 7 wins is not crazy to think about this year.
No, not with that 6-game homestand. Absolutely not. And to your point, these are all manageable games that they can win. A couple quick things on UConn before we move on to our next game to review. Offensive line's been dominant. I mean, we know how good Chase Lunt is, just like Christian Haynes this past April, projecting as a potential top 60, top 70 pick in the NFL draft. Valentine Sen, Chris Thornton. I mean, this is a good group that's back. I mean, I think a lot of people looked at the loss of Haynes and thought, all right, maybe this offensive line takes a step back. They've been terrific. We have to give them their flowers. They've done a tremendous job. What do you make of the report that the Pac-12 is considering adding UConn in football only? Is that something that is a good thing for the program, or should they be trying to get into a conference where the entire athletic department can get in?
I think the state of Connecticut would burn down to the ground if they left the Big East again for football. I would be very surprised if anything happened for a full conference move. I think for them to leave, it's going to take the ACC and a full guarantee that Clemson, Florida State, all the UNC, all those teams stay, right? I think it's fine if they went to the Pac-12, right, just for football. Because if you're them, it's like, why not? But if you're kind of rolling with 7-8 wins a year and as an independent, you have the revenue through basketball, through everything else. You invest in the program that maybe you could just be okay being independent. It's not like UMass where you absolutely need a conference to have a lifeboat, right? Thinking of them as the example of another independent. So you don't necessarily have to jump at it, in my opinion, if you can continuously sustain this type of 7-8 wins, right, and get to a bowl game, because that's kind of your target anyway. But you're never going to go more than that. You're never going to qualify for the college football playoff in this spot. So maybe joining the Pac-12 allows you to help with that. But there's so much duress going on with them right now, with people suing each other in the Mountain West. The AAC is mad. It's this kind of. It doesn't seem like you should join. If the Mountain West was officially joining with them and there was no issues, I would say go for it, because it's a fun place. There's a lot of fun teams in that conference. It's only football, right? 6 times a year you might have to travel out there. I don't think they need to make the jump personally. I don't think I would wait a little bit, because I think the way that college football is going, in 5 years, it's going to look completely different. So you're kind of joining a sinking ship out there anyway. That's just my opinion on what they should do. Trying to find a full-on conference, it would have to be, honestly, the Big Ten. The Big Ten would be like, okay, I'm going. Let's do it. Like, that would be legitimate to make all sports. I wouldn't for the ACC or really anyone else at this point.
Yeah, I think basketball is the caveat here,
Yeah.
right? It's the both of those basketball programs. It's a basketball school,
right?
And I think that ultimately that's the holdup here in terms of conference, an entire move to a new conference across the board. The Pac-12 to me makes no sense.
Yeah,
it makes no sense because, again, and I know where I disagree with you is I do think they need to get into a conference. Now, I also agree with you that in 5 years from now, it may not matter. I do think we're trending in a direction where conferences are going to disappear in major college football. I think it's going to be pretty much the top 50 or 60 programs in the country and then everybody else.
Yeah.
And that's where it's trending towards. But I do think they need to get into a conference. I just don't think the Pac-12 is the right conference. It logistically doesn't make any sense. You're joining a conference for the sake of joining a conference. There's no regional rivalry there. It just, again, I think that they're in a tough spot. And yes, if you're an independent, you can schedule the way you want. You can load up your schedule with enough games that you can end up bowl eligible. But realistically speaking, how much? Because here's the thing, right? If you're Jim Mora, and people have asked me this in the past, well, he could sell the basketball program as part of his pitch for the football program. I'm like, but what's he selling? That you can go to Gamble Pavilion and watch, that you can go to the Big East tournament in March, that you can go to tournament games in March. I mean, who cares? It's not about the basketball program if you're Jim Mora. It's about the football program and selling that. And look, UConn's not stupid. They kind of see where things are going. And I think they recognize that as big as March Madness is and the amount of revenue that generates, an expanded college football playoff could be just as big, if not bigger. Because oftentimes, and I've had a lot of people say this to me, it's college football that stirs the drink in major college sports. They're king, and then it's everybody else. So as popular as March Madness is with the brackets and the advertising dollars and everything else, they'll be the first people to tell you that they also, unless you're a power program, they don't really generate that much interest in terms of ticket sales during the season, where football's a different animal. So I think UConn wants to get into a conference, but it's got to be the right conference. I agree with you. I don't think that the Pac-12 is that conference. I think they should wait. Problem is, if you wait, though, I mean, how long do you have to wait? I think there's a real genuine interest there to get into a conference. But to your point too, Ryan, I mean, the landscape's going to change anyway.
Yeah.
No, go ahead.
Well, I don't know if you wanted to talk about it since it's a little, it's New England football adjacent, but just, with the news of Matthew Sluka today out at UNLV and this NIL stuff, it's just like, it's the wild, wild west and everyone's firing at the hip and there's so much going on that it just feels like it's best to just kind of hold and just wait, because it's lawless the way things are right now.
It's not going to change. I mean, look, the NCAA is sticking their head in the sand. They're not interested in fixing any of this.
No.
So they're just basically sitting there waiting to get sued and then activating their lawyers to deal with the lawsuits. That's what's happening here.
Right.
They're not interested in fixing this. They're not interested in legislating and managing the portal. Forget about NIL. They're not going anywhere near NIL because it involves people's money and they don't want to touch it. And I think that, the news we got today that Matthew Sluka is redshirting and stepping away from the UNLV program, I think you're going to start to see more and more of that. I just think, unfortunately, a good kid like Matt Sluka got caught in the crosshairs here. But I think you're going to start to see more of that. This is the world we're living in now. And please don't, don't piss in our ears and tell us it's raining by telling us that it's still about academics. It's not about academics. If it were about academics, there'd be no guys wouldn't be transferring left and right. There'd be no NIL. So don't sit here and tell me it's about education and academics. It's not. These kids are using these schools as a developmental league so that they can prepare themselves to play professionally. They don't. There's very few schools. There's probably 20 or 30 schools where the academics trump the athletics. Right. Everywhere else, it's all about athletics and the money. It's not about academics. So don't that ship is not only sailed, you know, it's on the other side of the universe practically now. So it's sad to see this current state of affairs, and unfortunately, I think we're going to see more of this.
So my only pitch to that is, if you kind of still want to see college football in its somewhat not purest form, but like the FCS is kind of the closest you have to where it's a little bit like that, which is why I say, like, you know, support local business, like support your local FCS program, because that's like, obviously they deal with it, right? I mean, you look at Max Brosmer from UNH is now at Minnesota, right? It definitely happens, but it's not near the level. Like, it's still
not near the level, and those guys tend to
graduate.
Right. Those guys tend to graduate, get their degrees, and then leave. I mean, you saw it this weekend. Luke Newman played at Holy Cross, multi-year starter, starting at left guard for Michigan State. K'Ron Lynch-Adams, I mean, played at UMass, starting at Michigan State. So you look at James Madison, they pick up a big 70-50 win over North Carolina. Dobbs, you know, big part in that win. Purdy, Spence, these are all Holy Cross guys that graduated and transferred down there and followed Chesney. So, yeah, to your point, those guys are at least going to play 2, 3, 4 years here, and then they're going to grad transfer somewhere else. Same thing with the Ivy League guys. But it's the purest form of football left. That's the reality of it now. Power 4 football, Group of 5 football, it's not the same anymore. Guys are bouncing around more than a kickball in an elementary school gym class. So, I mean, at the end of the day, it's the world we're living in now, and it's not going to change. How about the alma mater picking up a big win over Central Connecticut State? Were you excited about the big win over the Blue Devils on homecoming?
A win is a win, you know, so that's good. And I want to preface anything by,
and it was homecoming, correct?
It was, yeah, earlier than usual, which is funny. Everyone always complains and wants it later. They finally put it earlier. No one still comes. But it's interesting that I don't want any of this to go against CCSU. I want to give them a lot of credit, right, for them hanging in that game, right? You know, Brady Olson he didn't light it up, but he was okay, right? He was solid enough. Elijah Howard was solid enough, right? Their defense was solid enough. But I do think a lot of this was just so self-inflicted that I think that's just what's so maddening about watching UMass. You know, they go up 14-0 early. And it's funny, I turned to one of the guys who sits next to me, Howard Herman from the Berkshire Eagle, and I said, you know, this is what this game is going to be. Everyone was afraid of it being close, but this is what I thought it would be. And then boom, it's 14-14. Announcers curse right away, right? It's 15 penalties. So many of them are just silly penalties. The worst being on special teams with holding and offsides, and just it shouldn't have been as close as it was, right? When you were up 14-0, they should have been on cruise control and taken it to the end and won, maybe by 2 touchdowns, right? You know, the line I think was like 20 points or something crazy like that initially, right? But it's just disappointing when you think about years ago when they were under Mark Whipple, and they were, for the most part, blowing out FCS teams, right? They didn't with Molnar, they didn't with Bell, but they did with Whipple. So there was a time when this happened. And CCSU was a program that was really struggled last year. And I know they've had a decent enough start this year, but I think it's a win, but it's just more disappointing. I mean, they were down 28-21 in the third quarter, and I'm sitting there talking to you like, I can't believe this. Like, and again, all due respect to CCSU, they played their butt off for making that happen, right? But I just think so much of it for who the program UMass should be, or hopefully would be at this point, was just not there, where you're just sitting there like, all right, so I guess the only other win's going to be against Wagner, hopefully, right? And it's just, I think, just thinking of where we were a month ago and now here is just really, it's just frustrating. So,
well, and that's just it, right? And I'm with you. I think you got to give CCSU credit here, because look, Adam Lechtenberg has done a nice job there, and they beefed up the schedule.
Yeah.
They're 2-2, but they look like a team that could win the NEC.
Yeah.
And I think after losing 35-31 to UMass, there's no such thing as moral victories. But if you're Coach Lechtenberg, there's a lot of positives to take out of a game like that. But if you're a UMass fan, I mean, okay, you won on homecoming, but this is a game you should win by 2 or 3 scores. Again, no disrespect to the Blue Devils,
Right.
but that's the reality of things. And the fact that you hang in there and you have to come from behind to win by 4, I think it tells you everything you need to know about this football team and where they're at. I think it's going to be another long year. I think if you win 3 games, it's another one of those years. I mean, you can't call it a success if you go 3-9 again, but that's how it's shaping up here. Okay, it's shaping up like another 3-9 season. I don't see how it's not, Ryan. I mean, this football team is so wildly inconsistent that it's hard to think that they can win more than 3 games.
Yeah, and it sucks because you think about like all the optimism coming into this year. I picked them to go 5-7. I'm like, this is the year. Like that's considered a turnaround, and especially with the way that UConn's starting to play. Like I penciled them for a win over UConn at the end of the season. I figured, revenge from last year. They're playing a lot better, and that's not going to happen, right? I don't think it's hard for me to think that the way that UConn's playing, and then the news, of course, of the dismissal of Anthony Simpson, the wide receiver from last year, the leader on the team, and I guess there was a lot of internal stuff that it might be addition by subtraction in a way, but it's still like that's a guy who I thought was going to get 1,000 receiving yards this year. And
that's
it's just
very disappointing because I think when we talked to a couple of people on the staff during spring ball, to your point, there were a lot of people in the program that thought that he was going to be 1,000-yard plus receiver, possible double-digit touchdowns, and a guy that if he had enough of a big year, some people felt could go in day 3, late day 3, or be a priority free agent in next year's draft. And to see where he is now, it's too bad. It's too bad, and it speaks to the current state of affairs with the program.
Yeah, and I will say, Jacoby Kinney-James has looked awesome. Sterling Galvin's showed stuff at times. Jaquan Gibson, the redshirt sophomore, has been awesome. So, like, that's what's encouraging. But, Dominic Mazzotti, the big tight end graduate transfer, played in 1 game this year. So it's just, how is he hurt already? Like, what happened? Is it something on staff? Is it the condition? So
right.
You don't want to speculate. I'm sure they're working their butts off, but it's stuff like that. But that's that. A win was a win.
Yeah, a win is a win, unfortunately. Your next 3 games, this weekend's game is a potential winnable game. After that, you go to Northern Illinois, you come home for Missouri. So
right,
it's tough. Then they have a bye, and then Wagner comes to town. But it's frustrating, I would imagine, if you're a UMass fan, because again, you're in a position here where you thought this was the year. It's year 3. This is supposed to be the year they take that big step. It doesn't look like it's going to happen. And now, even though you're going into the MAC next year, you're essentially playing a MAC schedule this year. You have to wonder, what does the future hold for this program? And I don't want to speculate about Coach Brown and his status because, A, I have too much respect for him, and I think he's a coaching legend in the area. And B, I do think he deserves better. I think he and this staff have worked really hard to elevate the talent level of this program and to do the right things. And look, I said it when they hired him. If he can't win here, Ryan, I'm not sure anyone can win there.
Yeah.
And it's interesting, and I will leave you with this before we move off of UMass.
Yeah.
When I was at the Boston College game on Saturday night, there was a gentleman there who happened to be at the UMass CCSU game. He was in the press box for that game. As soon as the game got over, he got in his car and drove over to Michigan State, BC. So I could hear him talking to someone else in the press box. And I believe he had said that he had been to 88 or 90 FBS/FCS stadiums around the country. He said that UMass McGuirk was by far the worst. He said it's by far the worst stadium in college football of the ones that he's been to. Sounds like he's worked in college football as well, not just on the media side of things. I found that to be pretty telling. And I think it validated what a lot of us feel, that if this program is serious about taking that next step and being a consistent bowl team, that football performance center can't be the only thing you do in terms of an investment in the program. There's got to be more there. I'm not sure it's coming anytime soon.
Yeah, Western Mass is too beautiful to have McGurk. It's like you gotta make something better, and I don't
But
know
I
what you
think
do,
Western Mass
where you get the
hurts them,
money.
though. I think
Oh, for sure.
Amherst
Yeah,
I think it's not an easy place to sell. And I will say this, people will say, "Well, Happy Valley is an easy place to sell." I mean, that's in the middle of nowhere too. But that becomes a whole different conversation now because Penn State's had, a resume of success. But in the case of UMass, yeah, I think McGuirk, I think the state of the program, I think Amherst, those are tough sells if you're a 3-star kid or if you're a 4 or 5-star kid in the portal. I mean, unless you're looking for a place to go where you could start,
yeah,
it's tough to sell UMass.
yeah. It's a wonderful place to go as a student, but if you're going there for college football, there's like I don't know how much they're going to sell you on the thing. We got a great downtown. We got it's a big campus. There's a lot of fun stuff going on. But like at a certain point, you're like, yeah, but like, look at this stadium, look at these facilities. I always think,
You're
whenever I stand
playing
on
in
the
front of
sideline,
nobody.
yeah, whenever I stand there before a game and I see all the recruits, their tags, I just think, what the hell are these kids thinking of this place? But there's not I will say, like Buffalo, a lot of MAC schools, it's not like they're in these palaces. I will
No,
say that,
no.
right? So like there is something that can be said. McGurk gets a lot of crap, but I'm like, okay, well, definitely been to a fair share of schools too, and they're not always the best. But I go to UNH. Wildcat Stadium's awesome. I think that's a perfect not little, but it's a perfect spot. It's about 15,000 people or so, right, for like seating and that's nicer to me than McGurk, right? So anyway, we got other stuff to talk about. I don't want to bore people with UMass, but that's I think it's just they're kind of like the FBS schools in New England. They're kind of like the child that always gets in trouble that you have to keep talking about to your friends. Like, yep, the other ones are at school, they're doing well, but so and so keeps getting in trouble, and it's like that's UMass.
That
So,
is quite the comparison there.
yeah,
But
I don't have kids
you've
yet,
had
so I
you've
can't
had
say
a
for
couple
sure.
of you've had
Yeah,
a couple of interesting comps there.
yeah. So,
Like your wife telling you that UMass is like a bad friend.
yeah, yeah. This is what they do to people. Yeah, it's
They
what they
do.
do. So
All right, let's do a quick recap of the weekend that was. A couple of thoughts on the games in the other conferences, and then we'll fast forward and move ahead to this week. Let's take a trip around the CAA. Maine come from behind 26-15 win over Merrimack. Merrimack dominated play in the first half, but the Black Bears bounced back. Carter Peavy threw a couple touchdown passes. Big win for them. They improve to 2-2. They're on the road this week to take on Albany.
yeah, I was kind of surprised to see them trailing at a certain point. I do know the weather wasn't the greatest, but it's still. I think Merrimack's a tough place to win because it's kind of smaller, because it almost has this like high school football like on steroids environment. I feel like when you go there, so I think it's a huge bounce back win, especially after Derek Robertson came into your building and took down his former team. So Jermaine Corbett still, I thought, ran the ball pretty well. I didn't see a whole lot of the game. I'm not sure if Aiden Pereira got hurt or not, or if it was just he was struggling, but he was, Justin Lewis took more of the snaps, it seemed like, threw a couple interceptions. So it looks like the Warriors still kind of struggling at quarterback.
The revolving chair quarterback with them is a problem. And I think I think offensively, they've got a good skill group there.
Yeah.
But they really need to figure it out at quarterback. And I know they lost McCusker earlier in the year, but they were riding Pereira there for a while. Now Pereira's out, Lewis is in. They need consistent quarterback play. It can't be this revolving door of quarterback play. Look, if you play, as the old adage goes, if you play 2 quarterbacks, you have no quarterback. And I think in their case, they're playing like 3 quarterbacks. Don't forget Malachi Anthony as well. If you have 3 quarterbacks, you have no quarterback. So they got to figure it out there because it's clearly a problem for Merrimack. For Maine, like I said, big win for them. It gets them back to 500. This Albany game is winnable, but one thing with this program is consistency. They need to be consistently better. For Merrimack, doesn't get any easier. Dartmouth comes to town on Saturday. Armukala Kabongo is going to be there for that one. URI picks up a 28-21 win over LIU. Come from behind win. LIU coming into the game was 0-3, but the Rams come from behind and win it thanks to 3 touchdowns from former Sacred Heart running back and transfer Malik Grant. He finally had the big game that URI envisioned when they recruited him in the portal. He leads the way. URI now 3-1 heading into a bye week this week.
So my question for you, John, is similar to what you just said. If you have more than one quarterback, you don't have any. You see Hunter Helms, you see Devin Farrell, both getting reps in there. Do you think that throwing out two guys has been kind of a maybe tricky situation in trying to find that consistency? Because you'd think against LIU they should take care of business, but you know to see that I think was a little bit worrisome. Even though the Rams did pick up some votes this week in the top 25 FCS poll, so
Yeah,
that's
they're actually in the top 25. Yeah.
Oh, perfect, nice, yeah.
As is UNH. Yeah, I thought that was a concerning score. I know Jim Fleming was pretty excited after the game. Um, and I know Flem's attitude is a win, and that's my attitude too. A win is a win.
Right.
But I do think it's not necessarily about style points, but I do think how you win matters. And look, with this URI program, Pat Murphy at the helm of that offense, they're going to run the football. That's their bread and butter. They're going to lean on that offensive line. It looked like through 3 weeks that this was Devin Farrell's team and that Devin Farrell's going to be the quarterback. Now Hunter Helms plays more this week. So, yeah, in some ways, they're in the same boat as Merrimack. But I will say this, Jim Fleming said it right out of the gate at CAA Media Day that he believed that they were going to play two quarterbacks this year, that, that they weren't adverse to playing two quarterbacks, that if that's what it took to win, that's what they were going to do. That's how it's shaped up so far. It'll be interesting to see if the bye week this week, if they've had a chance to sit down as a staff and meet, if that's changed anything, and if they've decided, okay, we need to go in one direction here, because if we don't, then how much longer is it sustainable if you're playing both guys? So that'll be interesting to see there. UNH, man, they're continuing to put up big numbers. 38-17 win over Bryant. Tough loss for the Bulldogs, who have struggled out of the gate playing in the CAA. I mean, look, I think Chris Merritt, you coming into this season with so many new faces, over 40 guys, that it was going to be a struggle in year one in the CAA. They weren't saying that, but in talking to guys in the program, you could kind of read between the lines. But what can you say about this UNH offense, man? I mean, Seth Morgan, Caleb Burke, Logan Tomlinson, I mean, they are on fire right now. I almost think it's too bad that they're going into a bye week, because you kind of want to keep that mojo going. I mean, this offense is rolling right now.
Yeah, the only good, obviously any bye week, you get a chance to kind of look at what you've been doing and try and duplicate it. And I think rest up, especially, for the big stretch ahead. But it's 10 touchdown passes in the last 2 weeks for Seth Morgan. He's been everything that, everything and more, I think, that the Wildcats are hoping for. I mean, he was terrific at VMI, which is FCS level, back, when he first started in college football. So I'm not crazy, surprised to see him doing so well. But they didn't even really 99 rushing yards on Saturday. They didn't really need to run the ball, right? Because he's just dropping dimes all over the place, right? And it's just, I think their wide receiver room is so deep and is so talented right now that it's okay that they maybe don't have to run the ball a lot like they did against Holy Cross every game. They're multidimensional, and I think that, again, we said this coming to this year, it's almost kind of good that they flew in under the radar, because now they're kind of sneaking up on people, right, on the schedule, and looking a little bit more difficult now.
Yeah, no, I agree. And again, I also think, and this is not a knock on Max Brosmer by any means, because I thought he was terrific, but when you look at the success of Seth Morgan, I think it also speaks to this system. UNH has always been a good offensive program when they were a true spread under Chip Kelly and even under Sean McDonald, and now being more of a West Coast team under Ricky Santos. They have always been a very good offensive program. They produced a lot of good offensive coaches. Tim Cramsey, who's been a long-time FBS coordinator, Coach Carty down at Delaware now. He's the head coach at Delaware. I mean, they've had a lot of good offensive coaches go through the program, and it's no different now. But, yeah, this, to me, UNH is in a good spot here where they could win the CAA and possibly make a deep playoff run. Something tells me they're lining up to have a special season. Hopefully they stay healthy and it doesn't get derailed. Ivy League, of course, kicked off this weekend, and, of course, the 4 local Ivy League teams were all in action. Harvard picks up a 35-0 win over Stetson. Jaden Craig was the story there. He had a nice game for the Crimson. Of course, we know with Harvard, they're going to run the football. It was the debut of Andrew Orich, the new head coach who takes over for Tim Murphy after Coach Murphy was at the helm for 30 years. But Jaden Craig had a nice performance, Ryan, 12 of 20, 217 yards. He had 2 touchdown passes. The running game, which is Harvard's bread and butter, wasn't great, but they'll get it going. You got McLaughlin, you got Xavier Bascon. They got plenty of talent there, but a good start to the Andrew Orich era for the Crimson.
Yeah, and I mean, something they've prided themselves on, I think, is the run defense. And 16 yards allowed is nothing to scoff at. I know that Stetson's not really known as a strong FCS program, but still, right? 16 yards allowed, 2 picks. The defense was flawless as well. So, like you said, it was almost like a preseason game, getting to see so many different looks. Run the ball, and throwing the ball. So, just the perfect start, I think, for Harvard for this new era.
Yeah, and of course, Harvard travels to Brown on Saturday. I'll be there for that one. Brown picked up a 26-14 win over Georgetown to open the season. Jake Wilcox threw 2 touchdown passes there for the Bears, including an 87-yarder to Solomon Miller to open the game. Impressive win for James Perry's squad. Much different test this week with Harvard coming to town, but it's a rivalry game. I covered this game 2 years ago. Harvard won 35-28. This will be a similar type of game, but Brown needed this one to get off to a good start. Nice win for the Bears.
Yeah, gonna need to see them get the ball kind of rolling, run the ball. I think next week is going to be tough going up against Harvard, but I still think it's a tremendous start. You're on the road and playing at a smaller stadium, right? So it's just exactly how you want to go. They forced 3 turnovers for the defense, so certainly encouraging, I think, especially with Wilcox, if he can keep the momentum going from this week and from last year too, especially towards the end.
And, of course, Yale picks up a big 38-31 win over Holy Cross. Nathan Denny, running back Nathan Denny, scoring in that one with 12 seconds left to give the Bulldogs the win. You almost have to feel for Holy Cross, Ryan. They're 1-3, but they've played a really tough schedule right out of the gate. I mean, they won at Bryant, but they played UNH. Now Yale. I mean, it's URI to open the season. That was a tough slate. It doesn't necessarily get easier, although I do think it'll get easier for Dan Curran's squad once they get into Patriot League play. But for Yale, a lot of question marks, a lot of new faces on offense. But, man, Tony Reno and this staff are remarkable. A tremendous, tremendous job by Coach Reno and his staff. I mean, again, they find ways to win. They find ways to develop guys and keep things rolling. This was a big win for Yale.
Yeah, and it's just if you're a Holy Cross fan, it's just got to be brutal knowing that you hypothetically could have won all 4 of your games that you've played so far this year, right? Especially when you have another late game loss to Yale, similar to UNH that you kind of left there at the end, that you just couldn't make the stop for it. They're definitely still missing Jordan Fuller, and it's one of those where if this is the first type of year you're going to have the new head coach, you can accept it. I mean, in some way, right? It's better than getting blown out, of course, losing a bunch of players like they did. But full credit to Yale to come out on the road week 1 of their season and take down a team like Holy Cross who's playing solid enough and, shut down Joe Pazanski, didn't really, factor too much into the game. So, again, that's just the perfect start for Yale.
Yeah. Dartmouth picks up a 45-13 win over Fordham. Jackson Proctor with a couple of touchdown passes there for the Big Green. Paxton Scott had a big game, 6 catches for 121 yards. Nice win to open the season for Sammy McCorkle's squad. They visit Merrimack this week. We'll be at that one. Should be a good game there. But the Big Green kind of picking up where they left off last year when they went on a little bit of a run down the stretch and ended up grabbing a piece of the Ivy League pie. They'll be in the mix once again. I mean, I think this is, when you look at what they have back, Q Jones at running back, this Dartmouth team has the necessary pieces back and the experience to where they can once again be a factor in the Ivy League race.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think that we all thought Fordham was the team that many thought coming into this year, but it's putting up 45 points in week 1 for you is a hell of a start, right? Especially when, Paxton Scott's going for 6 catches, 121 yards. So that's the Ivy League was just perfect this week for the New England Ivy League schools, right? All getting the wins, but also all looking very solid in their games. There wasn't one that really they kind of struggled. No, they all kind of took care of business, like in a lot of ways that maybe thought people didn't think they would have run out the gate. So,
yeah, and of course, Stonehill, we're going to move over to the NEC here. Stonehill beating Sacred Heart 35-21. I mean, the Skyhawks have their number. through their first 2 years in the NEC. Of course, Sacred Heart coming off a big 40-14 win a couple weeks ago against Georgia, but Pioneers couldn't replicate that performance this week. And I think a big part of Stonehill's success is their running game. Jarrell Washington, Xavier Woodward, over 350 yards rushing in the win. Stonehill played to the weather. They ran the football, ball controlled Sacred Heart, and got the win. For Sacred Heart, they don't have a lot of time to think about it. Stonehill has a bye. Sacred Heart goes down to Delaware. So that's your reward for losing at Stonehill last week.
Right. I mean, Jalen Madison getting 110 rushing yards is I think, a good sign for Sacred Heart. But this game was over by halftime. It was 28-7, and that's just something that I don't think you and I saw it. I mean, looking back to our picks last week, you would have been perfect if it weren't for Sacred Heart. You had an excellent week picking last week if it weren't for these guys, right?
So ruined it.
I know. So
come on, Coach Joffrey, get the Pios going.
Yeah. So it's tough, like you said, especially after the Georgetown win. This was a little surprising to see them kind of get their pants pulled down here. So, but it's a tough turnaround. So
great analogy. They got caught with their pants down.
Yeah.
You are watching the College Football Preview Show presented by Yolked. I'm your host, John Saranides. As always, I'm joined by my partner, Ryan Barry. As always, if you are looking for a product that will help enhance your workouts, well, Yolked is that product. It's safe, it's effective, it tastes good, and at only 47 calories per packet, you're not also adding calories to your total at the end of the day. It is really an effective way to add some meaningful protein to your routine, and you will see results. It's a great product. Visit yolked.com today for more information. All right, it's time to look ahead to this weekend and pick our games for this weekend. Now, if my memory serves me correctly, you were keeping tally of our picks last year, were you not?
I was, yes. And
are we doing that this year?
I have been, if you'd like me to, but
sure, go for it.
Okay, because we're both doing pretty well. I mean, some games, let's be honest, it's it's not like the NFL, right, where it's sometimes kind of hard. It's some of these games are a little bit easier to pick, but still, we're both doing excellent. And like I said, that's why last week I was, you killed it. It was just Sacred Heart. So yeah, I don't have to, but yeah.
So do you have a total in terms of how we're doing up until this point? The competitor in me wants to know.
I could add them up.
Okay.
It'll take me a little bit, but I do.
Why don't we save it for next week's show then?
Sure. Yeah, that sounds good.
Why don't we do that? We'll give people an update on how we're doing head to head. All right, we're going to start off with Boston College, as we did to start the show. They're hosting the Western Kentucky Hilltoppers, one of the best mascots in college football. Hilltoppers coming in at 3-1. The Eagles are favored by 13 here, and the total is 54.5. I don't see a letdown here, Ryan. I think that Bill O'Brien isn't going to allow this to become a trap game. He said this in his media availability on Monday. I don't see this becoming a trap game. I don't see this being a letdown game. I see this being a Boston College win by 2 scores plus. What do you see?
Oh, yeah. I think this could be 28-14 win, and maybe, 28-10, being, I guess kind of generous. It'd be nice to see BC put up some points, right, against an FBS program. I think that'd be really helpful. But Western Kentucky hasn't really played anyone. The wins that they did beat Toledo, who's a solid team in the MAC, right? But that's not on the same level as BC. So I'm definitely taking BC, and I'm taking them to cover that spread. I think that they do that as well.
Yeah, I agree. I think Boston College takes care of business. Might get off to a slow start. Might even play from behind a little bit. But I think ultimately they're the better football team. They rise to the occasion. They take care of business. And look, Bill O'Brien knows. He talked about this after the game last week. This is nice. He didn't even mention enjoying it. He just said it's nice, but we got to move on to Western Kentucky. And that's the mindset with this BC program. That's what's different about O'Brien than what we've seen there in the past. All right. Next up, we're going to take a look at the FBS Independents, which, of course, for the last year, there's 2 of them in New England, UConn and UMass. Let's start with UConn. They host Buffalo. The Huskies are favored by 6.5.
Yeah, I'm gonna take UConn in the points there. I think last week was highly encouraging. I think that Buffalo did beat Northern Illinois last week, and of course their feather in their cap is beating Notre Dame this year. But I do think that Buffalo is, and they did beat UMass by 31 points. But I don't see a whole lot there, right, with that Buffalo team, and UConn has shown me a lot. They can run the ball pretty well too. As long as they do, I think they'll be okay.
Yeah, I'm going to go with UConn here. I think that, look, we've said this now since Jim Mora has been there, that they're at their best when they run the football and the defense does their part. They don't need to be great, but the way this program runs the football, the way that their offensive line can take over games, if they can do that on a consistent basis, they're either going to be in games or they're going to win a bunch of games. Excuse me. And you've seen it the last 2 weeks. They could have very easily won at Duke 2 weeks ago. They dominated FAU. I think they dominate Buffalo this weekend. I think they cover that number easy. I think they win by at least 2 scores here, maybe even more. Yes, if you think Stone is drinking the BC Kool-Aid, I'm overdosing on the UConn Kool-Aid here. I think I've said it all along. I think they're going to take advantage of this rare football homestand and take care of business and end up bowl eligible. I think they take care of business this week. If they lose, Barry, here's what I'm not going to do anything. I'm not going to.
Okay. Yeah, good. But we don't need to jump on that trend. Yeah.
No. I don't want to be like that Florida State guy.
No.
With the crab sandwich. But if they lose, I'll look like an asshat. But the bottom line is, I don't think they will. I think they take care of business. All right, Minutemen travel out to Miami of Ohio, winless Miami of Ohio. They're 0-3, but somehow winless Miami of Ohio is a 17.5-point favorite over your alma mater. I mean, technically my alma mater too, although I was a UMass Boston guy, but
we're in the same system. Yeah.
Same system. So when it comes to football, I identify as a UMass Amherst guy. So it's our alma maters.
Right.
We're both UMass guys. 17.5. You're an underdog by 17.5 to a winless team at. Only UMass.
I'm taking Miami, Ohio here, but I'm taking UMass to cover because when you look at why Miami, Ohio is 0-3, on the road at Northwestern, they lost by a touchdown. They took on Cincinnati at home, lost by 11, and they just lost to Notre Dame last week.
They lost 3-0 in that game.
Right. And and I know that I know they lost, but they weren't. I mean, it's a blowout, but it's not like it could have been a lot worse, right? So this was a crazy game last year. This was the game that took forever, right? There was 2 lightning delays.
That's right.
That was one of the worst things.
At one point, I remember you texting me going, I have a 2-hour ride home.
Yeah, I felt bad because I'm normally I'll stick this out. I'll do it. Like I don't want to seem like I'm not a wimp. I can do it, but I'm like, yeah, I got to make a business decision here. It's like midnight. I got to drive on Route 2 where there's like deer running through like it's the North Pole. So yeah.
Did you end up leaving?
Yeah, I listened. The game but here's the thing: the game like kind of restarted on like just about when I was getting home. So I put it on my phone. I was listening to it, and I was able to watch the end of it, tweeted about it, and wrote a story. And like it was like that's how crazy it was. So like
as if you were there, and then I totally blew up your spot tonight.
oh, I don't care. Oh no, I will admit, yeah, no, I was out of there because I made it so far. I was so disappointed when I left, and I'm like, because I also was afraid they were just going to cancel it, but
yeah.
So, and it ended up becoming close in that game at the end. I just can't trust them now. I can't, like, not like I ever fully could, but with how it's been, with how last week was, I think they're going to cover it close. I think 17.5 is crazy.
I do too. Even though Miami of Ohio plays pretty good defense and they've been in games, I think that number's outrageous.
Yeah, and Brett Gabbert's pretty solid, right, as a quarterback for them. But I'm taking
Blaine.
Yeah, right. I'm taking the Red Hawks here, but I think UMass covers. I think it's going to be a scrappy game. Like, I wouldn't be shocked if UMass won. Like, I really wouldn't at all. But I have no faith to outwardly pick them for that.
No, I have no faith in them at all. I'm sorry. I love Coach Brown. I have nothing but the utmost respect for that staff. But until I see otherwise, and I could be eating my words once again here, I'm going to go with Miami of Ohio to win, but UMass to cover. That number is outrageous. As frustrating as UMass can be, it's hard to pass up that number at 17.5. I mean, I think that they're a pretty favorable dog to take this week, but I don't see them winning. All right, shifting over to the CAA, Maine at Albany. Of course, there are no lines on these games. We're making up the lines, but we are going to go with Albany here as a slight favorite at 3.5. Of course, Black Bears coming off a win over Merrimack.
Yeah, this is a tough one. I I kind of have been squatting on this all day because it's similar to UMass where I don't
Hold
have a
on a
lot of
sec. Now I know how committed you are to New England Football Journal, and we appreciate and love you for it.
yeah.
But you were really thinking about this game all day.
No, yes, on some of the meetings I was on for work, it was more intriguing than thinking about,
You're like, "Yeah,
telling
man,
kids not to
this
vape, which
meeting
is
effing sucks. This is boring.
yeah. So I
How's
was
that
like,
Maine Albany game gonna play out?"
yeah. So I was like, is Carter Peavy going to do well like again? I don't know.
Yeah, I don't
So
know. I don't know.
yeah. So
Now we
I'm
know what goes on in Ryan Barry's mind during meetings.
oh yeah, yeah. Hopefully, no one from work's listening. That when we're talking about important stuff, I'm thinking like, what would a hypothetical line be between Stonehill and Maine? Yeah. So like, but
Or Albany and Maine.
right. I'm sorry, Albany, Maine. Yeah. So it's tough because you look at Albany and they barely beat Long Island. They were blown out by West Virginia, blown out by Idaho. But this is this their get right game, right? Is this Maine being consistent? I'm gonna take Maine here just because I want to have faith in New England. I want to believe in what they're building there, and but I'm not. But I don't think that I'm not very confident in the pick just because I don't know if they can be consistent enough.
That's my feeling here. Like I
Yeah,
said earlier, that's what's holding this program back this season from taking the next step is consistency, putting back-to-back wins together, getting a quality offensive and defensive performance. Usually it's one or the other. Now they got that in theory against Merrimack. Albany is going to be a tougher challenge for them, especially on the road. But it's like I want to pick them, but then in my mind, I'm thinking Monmouth went up there and destroyed them 2 weeks ago. So do I want to pick them? That's the hard part. I'm a big Jordan Stevens fan. I'm a big
yeah,
believer in what he's doing there. I'm a big believer in that program, but it's hard to pick them in a game like this because you just know that ultimately they might play tough. They might hang in there for a half to three quarters, but then Albany pulls away. So with that said, and I don't want our Black Bear fans to hate me for this, but I'm going to take Albany. I'm going to take Albany in a close game. I think that they cover, they end up winning by 5 or 6, but I want Maine to win this game because I want them to show us and the rest of New England that this can be a consistent program so that when people are sitting in meetings thinking about Maine football in their heads, I don't want conflict. I want them to be comfortable because they're armed with information from us that they can be comfortable in taking Maine and supporting Maine. So,
yes,
again, I'm going to go Albany here, but I really would love to see the Black Bears win 2 in a row and win that one. All right, Sacred Heart at Delaware. Obviously, no line in that one, but Delaware would be favored by 14.5 in this one. I mean, the Blue Hens, it's their last year in FCS football, and I think they're going to wreck shop. They've been rolling pretty good here. They're coming into this one at 3-0. Sacred Heart blows out Georgetown, loses by 14 to Stonehill. I was going to say I don't know what Sacred Heart team is going to show up, but I think Delaware is really good, and I don't think it's going to matter. I think Delaware covers that number easily. They win by 2 or 3 scores.
yeah. It's not really worth spending too much time on just because of where Delaware's at as a program and just especially being on the road. So definitely going with the Blue Hens.
Yeah. Yeah, me too. I mean, I think ultimately they're just a better program, more talented. And again, had Sacred Heart won last week, I'd feel more confident about them going in at 3-1. But
Yeah.
I just, again, consistency. It's been an issue with a lot of the programs we cover. You hope that they get that figured out. All right, we're going to shift gears here now and take a look at our Ivy League matchups. First up, we have Harvard at Brown. Noon kickoff on Saturday from Providence. Harvard is favored in this one by 7. 2 years ago, I covered this game. It was 35-28. I suspect this game will be very similar. I think Harvard wins, but I'm taking Brown here because I think that they play them even tighter this time around. I could see this being potentially a 3-point game. Harvard wins, but I'm taking the Bears as a dog here, -7.
Agreed. I'm with both Harvard and Brown on the points, mainly just because it's their second game. It's hard for me. If Harvard covers, it's because they pull away at the end. It's not going to. Maybe they're up 3 points and it's mid fourth quarter, and they break off for some big touchdown run, and it's 10 points, and then there you go. That's what gets you 7. But I think it's going to be close the entire game, especially where the game is at. So yeah, agreed.
Yeah, I think Harvard wins, but Brown, I think, will make them earn it. It'll be tough. All right, next up we have Dartmouth at Merrimack. Again, Merrimack, hard team to figure out. They almost beat Air Force out in Colorado, but then get blown out by UConn. They ended up winning their first game 2 weeks ago against Bucknell. Looked pretty good in the first half last week against Maine. Couldn't sustain it. They take on a Dartmouth team that I think is going to be in the mix from start to finish. I think Sammy McCorkle is building something special there. I love the experience that they have back, especially on offense. The line in this one is 8.5 for Dartmouth. I think they cover that. I think that they win this game by a couple of scores.
Yeah, agreed. I think that we said this beginning of the season. I love that Merrimack is able to schedule a game like this for Dartmouth. I think when you look, this might be like their biggest opponent they've ever had at Dwayne Stadium. I think personally, it's obviously between them and Maine, but I just think that the acclaim of Dartmouth and for how great a program they've always been. So definitely go with the Big Green here, and it's tough to tell when you don't know what's going on with the Warriors quarterback room, especially.
Well, that's just it. I really like this Merrimack team in terms of their skill. You got Corby, you got Wadley. I think they always play good defense, but I think they've got too much turmoil at the quarterback position right now, and I do think it's stunting the development of a talented skill group, a skill group that can make enough plays for them to win games. But I'm telling you, I think with Proctor and Jones and Scott, I mean, this Dartmouth offense has a lot of options, and they can really beat you in a bunch of different ways. They can run the ball and win a shortened game and win that way, or they can open it up and throw the ball and do what they did last week. So, but I think Dartmouth wins this one as well, and I think they cover. Next up, we have Yale at Cornell. Yale actually lost this game at home last year against Cornell. They visit Cornell. Of course, Cornell quarterback Jamison Wang, one of the better signal callers in the Ivy League. But as we saw with this Yale program last week, Ryan, Tony Reno and his staff, they don't rebuild, they reload. I know that sounds cliche when you talk about good programs, but it's true with them. They took care of business on the road against Holy Cross, got a big win there. They're favored in this one by 7. I'm going to take the Bulldogs in this one. I think that they cover easily and avenge last year's loss.
Yeah, agreed on both fronts. I know that Colgate is one of the better teams in the Patriot League this year, but still you're, losing by, was it 17 points to them or whatever it was, I think is still kind of tough on an opening week, right? So Yale went on the road, Patriot League team, got the job done. So that's an easy one for Yale. So into avenge last year, hopefully, because that was a tough loss last year. I think you and I both picked Yale last year, thinking that would have been a gimme at home.
Yep. Holy Cross hits the road this weekend. It just doesn't get any easier for Dan Curran's squad. They go to Syracuse this weekend. Syracuse, as of right now, there is no line on this game, but we're going to say that Syracuse is favored by 17.5. The interesting thing about this game, and I don't know why I thought this, but when I saw that they were playing Syracuse this week, the first thing that actually came to mind is I had spoken to people that were pretty decently connected to the Holy Cross program that actually thought Bob Chesney was going to end up taking the Syracuse job. It turns out they ended up going with Fran Brown. Chesney ends up down at James Madison. But nonetheless, look, if you're Dan Curran, just a really tough slate to start the year, and it doesn't get any easier against a talented Syracuse team who's 2-1. They've been pretty good so far. Of course, they're going to play at Boston College later on this year. They'll be one of those tough matchups for the Eagles, but I mean, that's a big number, but I have a feeling Syracuse covers that number. I think they probably win by 3 scores here.
When I saw this game on the calendar initially, I was excited about it.
I'm sorry, it's actually 14.5, not 17.5. I don't know. I don't know if that alters your thinking at all. No, I just purposefully changed the line.
No, I honestly, I was ready to take Syracuse at 17.5, like something like a, I don't know, 35-14 type game. I don't know. Yeah. It bums me out that this game is this year because, this team has still been exciting and fun this year, right? Dan Curran's got them playing every week, but like last year with Matthew Sluka and everybody, I think they would have had a real chance to beat in that Syracuse team last season. So I think what bumps me out is this isn't last year. I know we can't make that happen, obviously, but definitely going with the orange. And it's too bad that Chesney's not there, although probably for the best with how he's playing down in James Madison so far.
Yeah,
so.
they're doing. I mean, that 70-50 win. First of all, kudos to offensive coordinator Dean Kennedy, Situate, Massachusetts guy. I mean,
Yeah,
he just called an unbelievable game. What an unbelievable performance by that program. And it just, again, I look, we're all big Bob Chesney fans at New England Football Journal, and rightfully so. First of all, Bob is one of the best people you can meet. I mean, I have been in this business a long time as a coach in the media. He's genuinely one of the best dudes you're going to meet. He's just a great dude, super supportive of us from the beginning. And to see him have the success he's having down there, I mean, if you know Ches, it's easy to root for a guy like that because he's just a great dude, and he surrounds himself with good people. Drew Kanan, Dean Kennedy, as I mentioned, Chris Smith. I mean, he just surrounds himself. He just has a really good staff down there, and he surrounds himself with the right people. And it's proving to pay dividends so far for the Dukes. Stonehill and CCSU are both on buys this week, so they are not playing, as is Bryant. Bryant is on a bye this week as well. So, as is UNH as well. So those programs are not playing this week, but they will be back next week, and we'll be doing predictions for their games next week. All right, final thoughts here as we wrap it up. URI is also on a bye, by the way.
Yeah, it's always nice, makes it easier, I guess, for us for prepping. But no, it's another kind of a slow weekend, I think, coming up, especially at the FBS level. A lot of buys, but good national slate. So I'm excited, especially Georgia, Alabama. But excited just for another weekend. I'll be up in New Hampshire with family hiking, but I'll try and get some cell service. So,
yep. And you mentioned it, Georgia, Alabama, the game of the weekend, maybe in all of football. So
yes, easily.
That's a national championship caliber matchup with whether or not Saban is there or not. So,
right.
Yeah, I mean, I'm looking forward to another great weekend of college football. As I always say, we would love to cover all three levels of college, but we only have so many people. It's hard to find writers nowadays. Believe me, it seems like we're advertising for people every week, even into the season. We hope to get there someday. But for now, when it comes to Division I college football, we think we provide the best college football coverage in New England. So make sure you go over to anyfootballjournal.com for all your college football needs. I do also want to remind you that we would appreciate if you would subscribe for $2.99 a month. You get some of the best coverage in New England. It's $36 a year, and it's tax-free. We pay the taxes on it. So highly recommend that you subscribe today. Again, I think you'll like what you get for your money. You definitely get a lot of bang for your buck. All right. That'll do it for this week's episode of the College Football Preview Show. For Ryan Barry, I'm John Serenitas. We will be back with you next week to preview next week's games and recap this week's games. Until then, peace.